All right, let's get started. So today I'm going to talk about type hint in Python, and I think type hint allows developer to write a more predictable code and therefore reduces the amount of surprises we could get during runtime. A lot of people think Python is beginner friendly, but I honestly don't think so. So in terms of programming language, my mother tongue is C++, and I started to code C++ start from around 5 years ago. And the first thing I learned is the following code. The following crazy code is definitely not going to exist in this world. So on line 6, you declare variable a to be of type integer, and on the next line, line 7, you try to make it a variable of type float. And the compiler is going to yell at you and say, hey, no, that is definitely not going to get allowed. But Python does allow such as crazy things. On line number 2, variable a, I don't even have to declare the data type. By a simple assignment, a now becomes a variable of type integer. And a simple reassignment on line 5 just make variable a all of a sudden becomes a variable of type float. And this might be the main reason why people think Python is a beginner-friendly programming language, but in some sense that causes a lot of problem later on when a beginner tries to interface with a much more complicated programming API because the data type are implicitly assigned by the interpreter of Python. And I think that causes a lot of problem. So in C++, everything is kind of mouthful, but in some sense, it does reduce the amount of surprise you get during runtime. So the following is an absolutely normal C++ program. The function print Hung-Tien in map takes in an argument input, which is of type map, that maps a string to another string. The function does something very simple, that is, it prints out the value which Hung-Tien Huang is being mapped to. And by the way, I'm from Taiwan and I love buses, so the variable input is literally just a whole bunch of name, which is supposed to be a bus driver, and the value it is being mapped to is the license plate of buses. And the program executes without error, it compiles without error, it executes as expected. Now we are trying to do something stupid. The function is as same as above, but the input now becomes a variable of type vector of string, and we try to pipe that input into the function, and compiler is doing its job. It yells at you, hey, you did something stupid. You're not even allowed to get into runtime. So in Python, everything is concise, but it always gives me a lot of surprises during runtime, and all those surprises makes me want to punch my keyboard when I see those surprises. The following is an absolutely normal Python program. Its functionality is as same as its C++ counterpart we showed 3 slides ago, and it executes without error, its output is as expected, everything is perfect. So now we're trying to do something stupid. Stupid? Is it really stupid? I don't think so, because when you look at the declaration of the function print Hung-Tien in map, it takes in an argument input, but what is the data type of the input? The function definition tells nothing about it. So if I try to pipe in a list of string to the function, it throws in runtime errors at me, and that is frustrating to me. Well, what I mean is, if you are dealing with machine learning and you're using maybe Google TensorFlow's API to do that, and if it does not tell you what type you should feed in, that could be very frustrating because you might accidentally feed in the data type that is not expected. And due to the amount of data points you have to pre-process, it could take days before you see this type error. And that is very frustrating because you're wasting your time. That is why I really want to avoid this type of situation from happening again and again and again. So at the end of the day, what is type hint? Does it solve the runtime type error issue completely? Well, actually no, it does not. Type error still shows up during runtime. but it assists you to avoid such an error. So how do you actually declare a type hint? If it were a variable, the definition is very easy. Just name the identifier of the variable, followed by a column, and then the type of the variable it is supposed to be. If it were a function that has a return type, just add an arrow at the end of the closing parentheses of the argument, and then followed by the data type the function returns. And the type hint also allows you to declare a type alias. Since Python 3.9, you can, if you are using a built-in data structure like dictionary, tuple, you can just use those lowercase dict or lowercase tuple or lowercase list. But if it were to be somewhere between 3.5 or 3.6 all the way up to 3.8, to declare a type hint for all those built-in data structure, you actually have to import from typing, import dictionary, import tuple, or import list, where the first character of all those types are capital letters instead of the traditional lower letters. What I mean is that if you are using Python 3.6 to Python 3.8, you have to add that line from typing, import list, and dictionary. What I'm trying to show in this slide is that the code on the left-hand side is way clearer than the code on the right-hand side. The reason is the function print Hung-Tien in map, originally the argument input has an unknown data type. But on the right-hand side, I clearly specified the argument input to be of type dictionary that maps a string to another piece of string, and it is less likely that the user of my code feed in a list or an integer to the function print Hung-Tien in map, and that reduces the likelihood the user of my code or myself encounter that boo-ha-ha type error during runtime. What if the user of my code is very stupid and insisted on feeding a list to my print Hung-Tien in map, which is supposed to take in an argument that is a dictionary that maps a string to a string? Well, you still get a type error during runtime. That is why I say the type hint does not completely resolve the problem of receiving a type error during runtime. It reduces the likelihood of you encounter one. But hold a second. The type error is raised at line 7. Why is that? I declared the input argument to be dictionary that maps a string to another piece of string at line 6. It is supposed to catch that error at line 6 instead of line 7. Why is that? Why is that? Well, here's the smoking gun. On the Python documentation, it clearly says the following. The Python runtime does not enforce function and variable type annotations. They can be used by third-party tools such as type checkers, IDEs, linters, and etc. So even though on line number 6, I define the argument input to be of type dictionary, the Python runtime does not enforce that. So it has to wait until line number 7 in order to generate that runtime type error. So what is the expected output of the following code? Pause the video, take a few seconds, read through this code, and then guess the expected output. Well, did you get it right? The runtime type error is raised at line number 32 instead of line number 30, which means the print bus assignment table at line 31 is still being executed. Well, type hint does not resolve the runtime type error completely, so why do we bother to use it? Well, it gives the IDE the chance when you try to do something stupid. So on the upper left corner, I specify the print Hung-Tien in map without type hint. And on line number 8, when I try to squeeze in a list of string, the IDE thinks it is fine. But on the upper right corner, when I specify the function that's supposed to take in an argument of type dictionary, And when I try to squeeze in a list of string to the function, the IDE tells me, hey, you're not supposed to do that by adding a red underline below the input _1. And then also, if you add typehint to your function definition, it allows the IDE to show up some real useful information to you when you're coding. So on the lower left corner, the developer of that particular library does not specify any sort of type hint. And when I try to code it, when I try to use it, the suggestion that IDE pops up to me is very frustrating. Vocabulary is of unknown type, everything is of unknown type. But if I add a type hint to my function, it actually tells me, hey, input is supposed to be a dictionary that maps a string to another string, and that particular function returns nothing. And that is very helpful. So my conclusion is that use typehint whenever possible. It increases the readability of your code and then helps your user and even help yourself run into that very annoying runtime type error situation.